Freddie Mercury had millions of fans screaming his name, but there was one person he was terrified to approach. When he finally found the courage, it led to the most beautiful love story rock music has ever seen. This is the story of Jim Hutton, the quiet Irish hairdresser who transformed the world's most flamboyant rock star into a man capable of unconditional love. March 1985, Hutton nightclub in London. The same venue where Freddie Mercury had spent countless nights searching for connection among the glittering crowd of celebrities and admirers. But tonight was different. Tonight, Freddie's eyes locked on as someone who seemed completely unimpressed by his fame, his fortune, or his legendary status as Queen's frontman. Jim Hutton was just finishing his drink when the most recognizable voice in rock music nervously approached him. What happened next would change both their lives forever, creating a love story that remained hidden from the world for years, but proved that even legends need someone to come home to. This is the untold story of how a shy barber from Ireland became the most important person in Freddie Mercury's world. Hutton nightclub was Freddie's sanctuary, a place where he could be himself away from the pressures of stardom and the expectations of being rock royalty. But by 1985, even this refuge had become complicated. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone wanted something from him, and genuine connections had become increasingly rare. That's what made Jim Hutton so different. He genuinely didn't seem to care. Jim was 32 years old, working as a hairdresser at the Savoy Hotel, living a quiet life that couldn't have been more different from Freddie's world of stadiums and spotlights. Born in County Carlow, Ireland, Jim had moved to London in his 20s, seeking nothing more dramatic than steady work and perhaps some excitement in the big city. He had no idea that one night at Heaven would completely redirect the course of his life. "Can I buy you a drink?" Freddie asked, using the same line that had worked countless times before. But Jim's response was unlike anything the rock star had experienced. "Thanks, but I'm just finishing this one and heading home," Jim replied politely but firmly. For a man accustomed to people throwing themselves at his feet, this casual rejection was both shocking and intriguing. But what Jim said next would haunt Freddie for months, and you won't believe how it changed everything about the way Freddie saw himself. "Maybe you should try someone more your own age," Jim added with a gentle smile, not realizing he was talking to one of the most famous musicians in the world. The comment stung, but not because it was cruel. It stung because it was honest. Here was someone who saw past the makeup, the costumes, and the persona, speaking to Farrokh Bulsara rather than Freddie Mercury. Freddie watched Jim leave that night, and for the first time in years, he felt genuinely curious about another person rather than simply attracted to them. Friends who were with Freddie that evening later recalled that he seemed unusually quiet on the drive home, lost in thought in a way they'd rarely seen. What followed was perhaps the most genuine courtship of Freddie Mercury's adult life. Instead of using his fame or wealth to impress Jim, Freddie found himself actually working to win someone's attention through personality and persistence alone. It was a humbling experience that forced him to rediscover parts of himself that had been buried under years of performance and public persona. For months, Freddie would return to Heaven hoping to see Jim again. When they finally did encounter each other, their conversations were refreshingly normal. Jim talked about his work at the Savoy, his life in Ireland, his simple pleasures. Freddie found himself sharing stories about his childhood in Zanzibar, his early struggles with Queen, his fears about aging in a youth-obsessed industry. These weren't the theatrical anecdotes he usually deployed to charm people. They were real conversations between two men getting to know each other. Jim later recalled being gradually drawn to Freddie's intelligence and vulnerability. "He wasn't trying to be Freddie Mercury when we talked," Jim remembered years later. "He was just this incredibly bright, funny man who happened to have an extraordinary job." But Jim was also cautious, aware of the vast differences in their worlds, and uncertain whether someone of Freddie's stature could ever truly commit to a relationship with an ordinary person like himself. The breakthrough came 6 months after their first meeting, when Freddie finally worked up the courage to reveal his identity fully and invite Jim to one of Queen's concerts. Jim had known Freddie was a musician, but the scale of his fame became apparent when Jim found himself backstage at Wembley Arena, watching 12,000 people sing along to every word of Bohemian Rhapsody. But here's what happened after the show that proved Freddie was serious about building something real. Instead of taking Jim to an after-party or introducing him to celebrities, Freddie drove them both to Garden Lodge and made tea. They sat in the kitchen, still in their concert clothes, and talked until dawn. For Jim, seeing Freddie decompress from the high-energy performance into quiet conversation was revelatory. For Freddie, having someone who was genuinely interested in his thoughts rather than his fame was transformative. That night, I realized I had been performing even in my private relationships, Freddie would later confide to his closest friends. With Jim, I could just be tired, or confused, or happy without having to make it dramatic or entertaining. It was the first time in decades I felt like I could exhale completely. But their relationship faced immediate challenges that tested whether their connection could survive in the real world. The press was constantly looking for scandal in Freddie's personal life, and gay relationships were still criminalized in many parts of the world. More personally, Freddie's lifestyle of late nights, international travel, and constant creative pressure seemed incompatible with Jim's preference for quiet evenings and simple pleasures. The solution they developed was both practical and romantic. Jim would gradually begin spending more time at Garden Lodge, initially just visiting but eventually moving in. Freddie, meanwhile, began making changes to accommodate a more domestic life. He started declining some social invitations, choosing quiet dinners at home over glamorous parties. Friends noticed that Freddie seemed more grounded, less manic in his energy. But the most significant change was yet to come, and it would shock everyone who thought they knew Freddie Mercury. By 1987, Freddie and Jim had developed what they called their parallel universe, a private domestic life that existed alongside Freddie's public career but remained completely separate from it. At Garden Lodge, Jim took care of the practical aspects of their shared life, while Freddie focused on his music. It was a partnership that allowed both men to be themselves in ways they'd never experienced before. Jim's influence on Freddie's daily routine was profound. The man who had once stayed up until dawn partying began going to bed at reasonable hours. Freddie started taking better care of his health, eating regular meals, and even attempting to garden, though he famously killed most plants he tried to nurture. Jim brought stability and normalcy to a life that had been chaotic for decades. More importantly, Jim provided emotional support that allowed Freddie to be vulnerable in ways his public persona never permitted. When Queen faced criticism or when Freddie doubted his creative choices, Jim offered perspective without judgment. When the pressures of fame became overwhelming, Jim created a safe space where Freddie could process his feelings without having to perform strength or confidence. But their relationship wasn't without its complexities, and the challenges they faced would test both men in ways they never expected. The entertainment industry in the 1980s was not welcoming to open gay relationships, especially for major stars. Freddie and Jim developed elaborate systems for maintaining their privacy, using code words when talking on the phone, arriving at events separately, and maintaining separate public identities even as they built a life together. The emergence of AIDS in the gay community during the early 1980s cast a shadow over every relationship, and Freddie and Jim's was no exception. Both men were aware of the risks. Both had lost friends to the disease, and both lived with the constant anxiety that many gay men experienced during this frightening period. When Freddie began experiencing health problems in the late 1980s, Jim became not just his partner, but his primary caregiver and protector. The man who had once been intimidated by Freddie's fame now became fiercely protective of his privacy and dignity. Jim managed the household, coordinated medical care, and served as a buffer between Freddie and the outside world as his condition deteriorated. What many people don't know is how Jim's presence allowed Freddie to continue creating music even as his health declined, and this next part will show you the true depth of their love. Jim learned to operate recording equipment so Freddie could work from home when traveling to studios became too difficult. He helped Freddie with physical tasks that became challenging as the disease progressed. Most importantly, he provided the emotional support that allowed Freddie to face his diagnosis with dignity rather than despair. Jim also made the difficult decision to learn everything he could about AIDS care, essentially becoming a medical advocate for Freddie when dealing with doctors and treatments. In an era when many people were still terrified of the disease, Jim's commitment to caring for Freddie was both brave and touching. He refused offers from Freddie to leave, to protect himself, to avoid the inevitable heartbreak of watching someone he loved die. From 1987 until Freddie's death in 1991, Jim and Freddie lived what they privately called their married life. Though same-sex marriage wasn't legally recognized, they considered themselves committed partners in every meaningful way. Freddie even left Jim a portion of his estate in his will, along with a letter expressing his gratitude for their years together. During this period, Jim witnessed Freddie's creative process more intimately than perhaps anyone else ever had. He watched Freddie compose songs on the piano at Garden Lodge, observed his meticulous approach to vocal arrangements, and saw the vulnerability that drove his most powerful performances. Jim's insights into Freddie's creative process remained private for decades, shared only with close friends long after Freddie's death. But Jim also saw Freddie's fears, his moments of doubt, his struggles with aging in an industry obsessed with youth. He provided reassurance during the periods when Freddie worried about his legacy, his impact on music, his place in rock history. Jim's perspective as someone outside the music industry was often exactly what Freddie needed to regain confidence in his artistic choices. The domestic life they built together was surprisingly conventional. They had routines, shared responsibilities, inside jokes, and the comfortable intimacy that develops between long-term partners. Freddie cooked elaborate meals while Jim handled practical household matters. They watched television together, took care of their cats, and created the kind of stable home environment that had been missing from Freddie's life for decades. As Freddie's health declined in his final years, Jim's role evolved from partner to primary caregiver. The man who had once been nervous about dating a rock star now managed complex medical schedules, coordinated with doctors, and made difficult decisions about Freddie's care. Throughout this period, Jim maintained the privacy and dignity that Freddie valued above almost everything else. Jim was present during Freddie's final recording sessions, providing practical support and emotional encouragement. He witnessed Freddie's determination to complete as much music as possible while he still could, understanding intuitively when to offer help and when to allow Freddie the independence he needed to feel creative and productive. But what happened in Freddie's final weeks would prove the depth of their bond in ways that still move people to tears. Jim made the decision to stay by Freddie's side constantly, sleeping in a chair next to his bed, managing his medications, and providing the comfort of familiar presence during his most vulnerable moments. This wasn't just caregiving. It was a profound act of love that demonstrated the authentic partnership they had built over 6 years together. When Freddie died on November 24, 1991, Jim lost not just a partner, but the entire world they had created together. The private domestic life, the shared routines, the quiet intimacy, all of it ended with Freddie's final breath. But Jim's commitment to protecting Freddie's memory and privacy continued long after his death. Following Freddie's death, Jim faced the difficult task of rebuilding his life while protecting the privacy of their relationship. The media attention was intense, with journalists seeking details about Freddie's personal life and final years. Jim consistently declined most interview requests, sharing only limited information that honored Freddie's memory without exploiting their private relationship. Jim did eventually write a book about their relationship, Mercury and Me, but only after many years of consideration and with careful attention to maintaining the dignity that Freddie had valued. The book reveals the tender, domestic side of Freddie Mercury that few people ever witnessed, a man who loved gardening despite being terrible at it, who cooked elaborate meals for friends, who found genuine happiness in simple pleasures when he was with someone he trusted completely. What emerges from Jim's account is a portrait of Freddie Mercury that contrasts sharply with his flamboyant public persona, but feels completely authentic. Jim describes a man who was generous, thoughtful, occasionally difficult, often funny, and deeply committed to the people he loved. It's a humanizing portrait that doesn't diminish Freddie's legendary status, but adds depth and complexity to his character. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Jim's story is how he handled his grief and moved forward with his life. And this final revelation shows the lasting impact of their love. Rather than trading on his connection to Freddie Mercury, Jim eventually returned to Ireland and resumed a quiet life, working in gardens and maintaining the privacy that had always been important to both men. He honored their relationship by living with dignity and discretion, exactly as Freddie would have wanted. The relationship between Freddie Mercury and Jim Hutton represents something that many people, famous or otherwise, spend their entire lives searching for: authentic love with someone who sees past the public persona to the real person underneath. For Freddie, Jim provided stability, acceptance, and the kind of unconditional love that allowed him to be vulnerable and genuine in ways his career had never permitted. For Jim, loving Freddie meant accepting both the extraordinary and the ordinary aspects of life, with someone whose talent and fame created unique challenges. It meant learning to share someone with the world while maintaining the intimacy that made their private relationship special. It meant providing care and support during the most difficult period imaginable, doing so with grace and dignity that honored both their love and Freddie's legacy. Their story challenges common assumptions about celebrity relationships, about love across different social classes, and about what it means to build a life together when one partner's career demands constant public attention. Jim and Freddie proved that authentic love can develop between people from vastly different backgrounds when there's genuine respect, shared values, and commitment to each other's well-being. But their relationship also highlights the cost of living authentically in a society that wasn't ready to accept gay relationships openly. The secrecy that protected their privacy also meant that their love story remained largely hidden from the world, depriving other people of seeing a positive example of gay love and partnership during a critical period in LGBTQ+ rights history. Today, Jim Hutton is remembered not just as Freddie Mercury's final partner, but as the person who helped one of rock music's greatest legends discover that real love was possible. Their relationship reminds us that even the most extraordinary people need connection, understanding, and acceptance from someone who loves them for who they are rather than what they've achieved. The love story of Freddie Mercury and Jim Hutton proves that sometimes the most meaningful relationships develop not from grand gestures or dramatic romance, but from quiet moments of genuine connection, mutual respect, and the courage to be vulnerable with another person. In a life filled with spectacular performances and legendary achievements, Freddie's relationship with Jim was perhaps his greatest success, the one thing that brought him true happiness and peace. That's the beautiful and heartbreaking love story of Freddie Mercury and Jim Hutton, a relationship that transformed both men and proved that even legends need someone to love them for who they really are. If this story moved you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Mercury Moments family for more untold stories about Queen's legendary frontman. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe in the power of authentic love, and let us know in the comments what aspect of their relationship surprised you most. Until next time, remember, true love sees the person behind the persona.